we'll start with protozoans. So protozoans are kind of a cool, they're a polyphyletic group, which means they don't all have a single ancestor. Like most groups that we talk about, they have a single ancestor, but not the protozoans. Instead, they put all these critters that have kind of a similar anatomy, lifestyle kind of thing, and they put them together, and they call them protozoans. So basically, they're a complete organism within a single cell. And so that's a protozoan. So if you are a complete organism within a single cell, they call you a protozoan, and you go in this polyphyletic group. But it's important to know that they don't have that single ancestor like a lot of groups do. And they are all eukaryotes, so they have a nucleus. So protozoans can reproduce in a couple different ways. The first one is binary fission, and that's when an organism just makes a complete copy of itself. So that's basically what's going on here. We're having binary fission. Yeah. Okay, so the organism is just making a copy of itself. Then we can have budding. So budding kind of seems like it's the same, but you see how these two cells are exactly the same size at the end? With budding, you would have kind of like a little bitty nubbin kind of cell come off, and it would be smaller than the parent cell. And the little one is called a daughter cell, and the parent one is called a parent cell, like the original cell. And then we can have multiple fission, which you have like large number of daughter cells formed from binary fission. So this is all asexual reproduction, right? Because it's just one parent. So all the babies would have the same DNA as the parent. Now, a lot of these critters, we talked about this a little bit, symbiotic lifestyles, but these have a lot of different symbiotic lifestyles. So a symbiosis is basically just when two organisms have grown, whether they want to or not, because sometimes one of them would rather not, have grown to be very closely tied to each other. And they live in close association, not necessarily something that both of them like, but sometimes it is. So a parasite, which a lot of protozoans are parasites, is when one organism lives in or on the second organism, the host. So, for example, this critter here is a parasite of humans, and it lives, well, you can guess where it lives. And so it is the host will be negatively affected, and the parasite will be positively affected. Okay, so the parasite would get a gain out of it, and the host usually there's something negative. A definitive host means that they harbor the sexual stage of the parasite. So this is important sometimes because sometimes you can be a host, or an organism can be a host, and they just basically are literally like a place for it to live. There's no sexual stage, it's not going to reproduce or anything like that. And then, so that's the sexual host is going to be the definitive host. And if you're an intermediate host, you harbor the asexual stage of a parasite. So, for example, let's say there was a type of parasite that lived on meat. Let's say the meat was the intermediate host that would just kind of like live there, whatever. And then let's say a human ate that parasite, and the human was the definitive host. It would be able to reproduce and that kind of thing, and it would be a little more dangerous in the human than the intermediate host. Commensalism is when one is benefited and the other could care less. So this happens too, where a species maybe benefits and you don't even notice. You could talk about maybe like mites, or maybe nematodes are that basically cover like every surface of the earth. They're really, really small, microscopic, and they're basically everywhere. And so if you have nematodes on your skin, you're neither help nor hurt. You don't really care, and the nematodes benefit, and so that would be commensalism. And then you can have a mutualism where both species benefit. So for example, you have a bunch of different bacteria in your gut that help you digest and things like that. You hear people talk about like probiotics and healthy gut bacteria and stuff like that. Well, that would be a mutualism because they're getting something from living with you, food or whatever, and you're getting a benefit from them as well. So that would be like a mutualism. So just some common protozoans, just so you kind of have an idea of them. Euglena, this group is called Euglenozoa, but the actual critter is called Euglena. And that's a pretty common protozoan that you hear about like in biology. It is phytoflagellated. What that means is it has a flagella right here, and it also has chloroplasts. So that means it can do photosynthesis. So phyto means like light, and they can be zooflagellated either. So that means like animal. When I taught biology in a face-to-face classroom, a lot of times I would make students have Latin vocabulary words. That way they could help, it could help them understand things if they maybe knew the Latin but didn't know the specific thing that it was talking about, like photoreceptor. That's gonna, alert them to light. Kineto, that means moving. So this is probably something to help them move. Okay, stuff like that. And then they have a spiral or crystalline rod of unknown function inside one of their flagella. Very exciting. Then we have a supergroup, Amoebozoa, and amoeba is the main critter. And there's a lot of different species of amoeba. They have something called a pseudophodia. So pseudo is like false, fake, and podia means like foot. Okay, so some lack a cell wall. So basically these are like their fake feet right here, and they kind of like move forward using that, the way they move that way. Endo would be inside. Ecto is like outside. I'm just trying to help you with some of these. Vago, that has to do with eating. Just trying to do ones that I remember. It might help you. And then a test is basically a protective structure secreted by the cytoplasm. So it's just like a little, kind of a more heavy-duty cell wall or cell membrane.